So here you are. Normally people try to figure out fairly quickly if a video is going to be worthwhile or a waste of their time. YouTubers are told to try to get the message across to sell their viewers in the first 15 seconds. However, I've got multiple audiences looking here, so you need to cut me a little slack because people are coming from various different viewpoints that are going to be interested in this. Let me ask you first, what do you know about the Moonies? Why do people get in and stay in the Moonies? Pretty weird, huh? It's mind control. That's why. And if you start to feel like maybe you should turn away from this video for some reason because I am out there on the fringes, no. Because I might be an apostate or an anti-Mormon? Is that a possibility? Or because I might be a conspiracy theorist? All these are mind control tactics when we use names and labels with loaded phrases that stimulate people to shut off their rational minds, to tune out and not listen to something that threatens their belief system, especially when it's involved with a powerful group or organization that they belong to, such as the Moonies, such as Scientology, such as SDA, such as the Jehovah's Witness program in the Watchtower Society, and yes, in the LDS Church. But this is to a much broader audience, even though it's specialized probably mostly for the LDS. There are aspects of this regarding mind control, Mormonism, mysticism, Freemasonry, and even magic. Manipulating our society on a much larger scale than the microcosm that is represented within Mormonism. So if you're actually an Exmo instead of a faithful TBM, or maybe even a New Order Mormon, you're going to have a different opinion and you're going to have different things actually programmed into you where you are conditioned to shut somebody off who's offering information that you've been actually conditioned to reject for one reason or another, whether it's from the news media seeking to discredit anyone that would draw attention to what the Freemasons are doing, who lead business, industry, religion, and all sorts of extremely influential aspects of our society, including what's called education. So I'm going to show how these things actually are linked together. We have Freemasons leading many religious orders that are deemed to be Christian. We have Freemasons leading the countries of the world in business, in banking, and in politics. A tiny fraction of the percentage of the population of the world governs it through their influences in multiple aspects of society. So I'm going to put some things together. All right, let's get with it right now. Here we go.
Out of these troubled times, our fifth objective, a new world order, can emerge. 100 generations have searched for this elusive path to peace, while 1,000 wars raged across the span of human endeavor. Now we can see a new world coming into view. A world in which there is the very real prospect of a new world order. A world where the United Nations is poised to fulfill the historic vision of its founders. Global governance.
Never before has a new world order had to be assembled from so many different perceptions.
Good evening, everybody. President Obama and British Prime Minister Gordon today calling for a new world order to tackle our global economic crisis.
We've got to give them a stake in creating the kind of world order that I think all of us would like to see.
And this present window of opportunity during which a truly peaceful and interdependent world order might be built will not be here open for too long.
When our founders declared a new order of the ages, they were acting on an ancient hope that is meant to be fulfilled. And after 1989, President
Bush said, and it's a phrase that I often use myself, that we needed a new world order, and instead it looks like we got a lot of this.
So for those of you who are not familiar with various NGOs that are engineering a new world order, there are maybe 1,300 that would be listed on the particular website that I'm tuned in here right now, and we've got the super class 400, the people basically most connected with various NGOs, non-government organizations, in other words, non-elected people that form world policy, are comprised of these various people. And so Henry Kissinger seems to be connected to more than anyone else. And if you look just down the list a little bit, we've got Brent Scowcroft. That's Elder Brent Scowcroft from the church, General Brent Scowcroft, and we're going to have a little section on him. And so when we take a look at in here you see names, Rockefellers and George Soros and just these massive globalists here, Zygmunt Brzezinski. And if we take a quick look over at Brent Scowcroft's page on Wikipedia, we can see that even right there, he's listed as being involved with the Aspen Strategy Group, the Trilateral Commission, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Atlantic Council, various NGOs whose goals are to submerge the United States into a global government, basically to abandon the sovereignty of the United States into a global government, into a new world order. And we're going to hear him say that multiple times in a speech at BYU to the graduating class. And in case you've associated these things with somebody who's with things that are not true or conspiracy theory, we will listen to political leaders, to global leaders declaring this themselves, as we've heard George Bush Sr., George Bush Jr., William Jefferson Clinton, David Rockefeller all declare and Obama in a little clip I played right at the beginning. So it's not like it's a big secret. It's just that what we'll see is after Ezra Taft Benson passed away, and we've got Gordon B. Hinckley running the show, we have numerous people from the Council on Foreign Relations having free access to the young folks at BYU. You're going to have speakers such as Brent Scowcroft, who, yes, is a prominent member of the church, CFR, Trilaterals, Bohemian Grove guy, absolutely horrendous rap sheet as far as being involved with these, what would the Book of Mormon and President Benson would have called secret accommodations. Or you've got Zygmunt Brzezinski, Dick Cheney, these people being honored by LDS presidents at BYU, which is now recruiting grounds essentially for the CIA, the NSA, and the FBI, where these people are serving within the companies, actually privately owned corporations that we think of as government bodies, and functioning to bring to pass what is warned about in the Book of Mormon. So we're going to look at factual evidence that supports this, and you can determine whether or not you think it's some nutty conspiracy theory or if it's conspiracy fact, as President Benson said. What we will see is absolute cooperation on the part of LDS church presidents currently, or at least Hinckley and Monson, with the people that are working to destroy the sovereignty of the United States. Not to mention creating wars which cost a lot of lives, bring a lot of profit to the companies these men are involved with, and murder people on a wholesale basis. And we'll find President Hinckley supporting that. Like I said, if you think that sounds rash, just watch the evidence here. You can watch Hinckley in action. Go. Here's Gordon B. Hinckley. Oh my gosh, hopefully I didn't offend any TBMs out there thinking this guy is a holy man. Well, I'll tell you what. The Bible says prove all things. You're supposed to believe that the Bible is pretty much scripture, especially if it's an area that Joseph Smith didn't bother to correct in the JST, right? Prove all things, hold fast to that which is true. Okay? Well, truth should be able to stand in the light, shouldn't it? Shouldn't it? Haven't we heard that kind of thing from J. Reuben Clark, or even Gordon B. Hinckley said our history is an open book? But why do we see all these obfuscation techniques, all this NLP and hypnotic language and all these mind control techniques being used upon us in the church environment? Why do we see that? Why do we have the same problems that the Jehovah's Witnesses have? Maybe not on the same scale or as covertly in some aspects of the religion, but if ever there is anybody under mind control and absolute behavioral and information control, it would be the LDS missionaries. Those boys are under the strictest mind control program probably on the planet, of people that actually get to walk outside and pretend like they're free. So let's start off here. I'm going to show Gordon B. Hinckley giving his talk on War and Peace, and I'll show some of the manipulative things that he does to turn things around and get us to believe that it's okay to go murder people. That's right. But Jesus will make sure they live again, and he'll make it sound all okay in the end. However, he's going to justify us going out and murdering people in Iraq who had nothing at all to do with planes that were flown into the Twin Towers in New York, which obviously had nothing to do with them falling down, so you'd have to be absolutely retarded to think that every steel beam within them instantaneously and simultaneously just vaporized, and they went down just as if there were demolition charges in it, straight down, free falling. Two of them, actually three. One that wasn't even hit by the plane, the Lehman Brothers building went down. And you know what? Somehow people even believed, after how obvious it was, that whatever the government told us through the government-controlled media, that it was true. I say government-controlled. You'll learn that through corporate governance. I'll get into that shortly. But I want to show this talk probably early on here where Gordon B. Hinckley just manipulates us into feeling okay about mass murder, incinerating people 10 times faster than Hitler ever thought of doing it, and doing it in the Middle East. Yep. So there he is, shaking hands with Dick Cheney, former, was he CEO, president of Halliburton? Halliburton profited awfully well off of that war, didn't they? And it's still going. Hey, what kind of a handshake is this? Tommy Monson and George Bush. Does that look a little bit familiar to some people? Well, there we go again. Should we get a close-up? My oh my, what's going on there? That looks pretty familiar. Not completely familiar, but pretty familiar. So this says it's a Freemasonic handshake. Did you know Thomas Monson was a Freemason? I haven't heard him mention it in General Conference, but he and Georgie boy there look like they've got some kind of a special friendship there. Maybe we should get a little closer look at handshake Gordy had going on there. Well, look where Dick's finger is. Why are they shaking hands so funny? Do people normally do that? They wouldn't be Freemasons, would they? Oh, we know the George. Oh, so when we're talking about Anton LaVey or his mentor, Aleister Crowley, yeah, they're both high-degree Freemasons, just in case you wondered. Crowley was known as the most wicked man on earth. Nice to know how Satanists are well accepted within Freemasonry. think. Obama Rama. Birds of a feather flocking together. Elijo. Okay, well, I'll tell you what. There's a lot to this. Magic, Masonry, mind control, and Mormonism as a microcosm of our world. Here's Building 7 coming down. That's demolition. That's a no-brainer. The Twin Towers are demolition. It's not rocket science. You may not think you're even in a high control religion. You might want to watch the mind control videos I put out. They'll usually say something about Mormons and J-dubs and mind control on them in the Dodger Game channel. So, without further ado, let's get into this particular video. It's going to deal with a control network that supersedes what you believe is representative government, constitutional government. We're going to get into something called corporate governance. I'm going to show excerpts from someone else's material that validate through actually government reports certain things that you're probably unaware of. Because when I speak of corporate governance, I'm not talking about corporate lobbyists in Washington, D.C. that have undue influence. What I'm talking about is an entirely different world as far as what governs the United States and basically most likely all other countries. Outside of what people believe is the so-called representative form of government. I like to link together secretive and secret societies that network, whose members are networked, and we find at the top of business, religion, finance, and politics, and media. So, there's my intro. I do have a fair amount of experience in studying things related to this over a long period of time, and especially within Mormonism. So, take it from there. Pay attention, and I think most people, even if you've studied plenty of stuff regarding NGOs and undue influence, shaping, controlling, all major political parties, etc., the whole corporate governance thing is probably new to most of us. The United States is comprised of over 185,000 incorporated state, county, city, town, municipalities, districts, councils, school districts, pension funds, enterprise corporations, lotteries, etc. And they are actually for-profit corporations, unbeknownst to the public, which have been mistakenly called a representative government. The hidden wealth in this investment, collective investment here, of these 185,000 corporations, starting at the top with the United States Incorporated, and then you've got state governments, and you've got city governments, and you've got municipalities of different sorts, counties, and some of the entities I've just named. There are 185,000 of them, about 10% of them, about 18,000 in California, and they are actually privately owned businesses. We think of them as our government, but we're going to look at the comprehensive annual financial reports from these entities, like from Salt Lake City, and from the state of Florida, from Sacramento, and this video's, it's over 3 hours, and we're just going to take a few minutes to show some highlights, and I'm going to encourage everybody to, I think you're going to want to see this. This is like, if you took a semester in U.S. government history or something, you wouldn't learn any of this, and you'll know more about the way things really operate by this information than you would in any class, ever. The collective investments totaling, what does it say, well over $100 trillion. And this was like in 2010. 100 trillion. So at the time this, some of this data was being gathered, this was, the national debt was probably approaching, 8 or 9 trillion. So now it's approaching $20 trillion. And we're going to learn so much about how things really operate, that these are actually for-profit
businesses, and we call them government. Everything is commerce. But these are documented. I mean, they're incorporated, and they have the comprehensive annual financial reports, which people just don't see or understand if they do see them. And this gentleman's really going to get into detail. You can see, and you can look them up online yourself. Ron Paul was talking about audit the Fed. It's audited every year. He's phony. This information is available. Things are so much different than we perceive.
I went to a commonly used website named Wikipedia. Now, I don't usually use Wikipedia as a source, but in this case I made an exception. The information is well-sourced and easily verifiable. A municipality, or municipal corporation, is the legal term for a local governing body, including but not necessarily limited to cities, counties, towns, townships, charter townships, villages, and boroughs, like the 5 boroughs which comprise New York City proper. Municipal incorporation occurs when such municipalities become self-governing corporate entities under the laws of the state or province in which they are located. Often, this event is marked by the award or declaration of a municipal charter from the state of incorporation. Let's take one of the largest states as an example. Do you live in California? If so, which corporation do you live in? There are 480 incorporated municipalities in California, of which 458 are called cities and 22 are called towns. Under California law, the terms city and town are explicitly interchangeable. See Government Code sections 34500 through 34504. So, the name of a municipal corporation can either be city of blank or town of blank, regardless of its population. The term township is obsolete. The terms villages and borough have never been used in California. Here's an alphabetical list, and I'll bet that you find your own city or town. Notice that the left-hand column lists the city or municipality, the middle column lists the county where that municipality is housed, which is a totally separate corporate entity with its own local, national, and international investments and enterprise operations that must also file a comprehensive annual financial report every end of business year. And the right-hand column shows the date of incorporation for the city or municipality, some going more than a century back in history. Each corporate city or town that was just listed has within them other municipal corporate structures like school districts, pension funds, utility companies, city councils, and even enterprise operations such as golf courses, movie theaters, malls, etc., etc. As stated earlier, the government owns just about everything you see through collective investment. But you must not think of these as just individual corporations, for as we saw above with the Salt Lake City Corporation, these more than 18,000 corporate governments in California are like bank branches as well. The only way to get a grasp on the power, wealth, prosperity, land, and property ownership of the state of California is to take all of these over 18,000 individual corporate governments, including school districts, counties, the state corporation, municipalities, enterprise operations, cities, towns, pension funds, etc., not forgetting its foreign investments and operations. For instance, CalSTRS is now an offshore multinational corporation, and then add up their collective private investments and count them as branches or sub-corporations of one main corporation, which is California Incorporated. What better way to hide the wealth of the corporate government than to divide it up into thousands and thousands of branches, making it nearly impossible to add up the actual ownership and wealth of the government as a whole. But don't stop there. For then you must consider that collectively between the municipalities and individual corporate governments within all 50 of the United States proper, America houses over 185,000 different corporate governments, municipalities, and entities, which we might as well call branches. Now, the word collective is vital to comprehend here, for as one giant framework of a country, this collective corporate United States government owns almost everything in sight. And this will be shown later in this presentation. The United States has now been almost completely privatized, with land and municipalities often being sold off to foreign investors and foreign private corporations. In fact, under Executive Order 12803, signed by then President of the United States, George H.W. Bush, in 1992, the Corporation of the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C., neither a state nor a part of the 50 States United, this federal corporate government was given the authority to privatize most or all of the infrastructure within the United States without congressional consent or vote. This means that the federal government, or the corporation that acts in lieu of a federal government, can and has allowed the selling of any municipalities or city or any government's assets which were built with taxpayer monies, including but not limited to roads, tunnels, bridges, electricity supply facilities, mass transit, rail transportation, airports, ports, waterways, recycling wastewater treatment facilities, solid waste disposal facilities, hospitals, prisons, schools, and housing. Executive Order 12803 lists these as examples of America's saleable and or leasable infrastructure. But this is not to be taken as a complete list, as these are just some examples of what our government has been selling off to foreign investors for almost 20 years. There's that word again, collective. For instance, all individual Methodist churches pay the main corporate church, which is indeed a for-profit corporation, with each of their individual 501c3 houses of worship across the country and the world acting as their non-profit branches. This is why all denominations hold general conferences. They are nothing but giant corporate budget meetings. In this way, churches can be regulated by the state.
Let's see what Gordon B. Hinckley, the prophet of the Lord, has to say about war situations in his time. See.
Those of us who are American citizens stand solemnly with the President of our nation. The terrible forces of evil must be confronted and held accountable for their actions. Such groups. The Book of Mormon speaks of the Gadianton robbers, a vicious, oath-bound, and secret organization bent on evil and destruction. No one knows how long it will last. No one knows precisely where it will be fought. No one knows what it may entail before it is over. We've launched an undertaking of size and nature of which we cannot see at this time. Occasions of this kind
Now more than ever, as families in the Middle East and elsewhere brace against the bombs of the American war machine, God needs to be communicating with his prophets to cry out against these modern Gadiantons and proclaim peace to the world, freedom from this wickedness. But instead, ministers of all faiths promote war. They stand as Amalekites upon the towers. In the name of patriotism, liberty, and freedom, they support war efforts and call the people to obey their wicked leaders, as the Amalekites did to the Lamanites who attacked the innocent Nephites in the Book of Mormon. And even now, as the bombs are falling in the Middle East, we ask, where is the prophet of the Lord? Gordon B. Hinckley, art thou a prophet?
I do not know what the future holds. I do not know what the future holds. In the course of history, tyrants have arisen from time to time who have oppressed their own people and threatened the world. Such is adjudged to be the case presently.
So, Gordon is starting off quickly here. First he goes in with the warm-up business there about patriotism and somebody not hesitating to serve their country after all that time, and to be loyal and head into the Middle East because duty calls. And he starts talking about empires of repression who have victimized others, such as the Ottoman Empire and the British Empire, of which the United States is actually a part, despite what they may have taught you in school. So now he says tyrants have arisen who have repressed their own people. Oh no, the United States will come to the rescue. I suppose that Saddam Hussein is a lousy ruler like many others are, but somehow we're going to justify attacking them based on what? Somehow we're going to tie this into the planes hitting the towers in New York? Were there any Iraqis there? No. Anyone representing the Iraqi military or government? No. Saudi Arabians? That's what they say. Are we going to attack Saudi Arabia? I don't think so. They're like the 51st state. You gotta be kidding me. So, even though the buildings came down, demolition style, all three of them, when two got hit by planes that had no capability of instantaneously and simultaneously melting every steel support in the buildings, that they free fell straight down to the ground exactly the way they do when the demolition charges are placed. Yeah, people actually thought the planes brought them down. Somebody did. I don't know who. Somebody did. Beyond any ability to comprehend scientifically, but people will believe just about anything on television these days. So here we go. Gordon's already creating some false associations here to excuse what he's going to introduce as A-OK with God.
And consequently, great and terrifying forces with sophisticated and fearsome armaments have been engaged in battle. Many of our own church members have been involved in this conflict. We have seen on television and in the press tearful children clinging to their fathers in uniform going to the battlefront. In a touching letter I received just this week, a mother wrote of her Marine son who's serving for the second time in a Middle Eastern war. She says that at the time of his first deployment, he came home on leave and asked me to go for a walk. He had his arm around me and he told me about going to war. He said, "Mom, I have to go so you and the family can be free to worship as you please. And if it costs me my life, then giving my life is worth it." He is now there again and has written to his family recently saying, "I am proud to be here serving my nation and our way of life. I feel a lot safer knowing our Heavenly Father is with me."
So, are we paying attention to what this guy is saying? Can you even believe what you're hearing? Okay, the guy says, and apparently Gordon B. Hinckley sounds like he's endorsing these thoughts, that he must go to war in Iraq, to invade Iraq, to invade and attack and murder and burn alive the Iraqi people who've done nothing to the people of the United States so that we can be free to worship. Yeah, that's what he said. We can retain our freedom, be able to have all these freedoms that are so important, like being able to worship. He's going to tie this in with the Book of Mormon, no doubt. But they've done nothing to the people in the United States. This was a 100% unprovoked attack. And now he goes on to say that he's glad knowing the Heavenly Father is with them. Obviously, God approves of attacking and bombing the crud out of all these people in Iraq. I'll show some footage here, maybe from CNN, of the bombs falling in a city where human beings live. It's like bombing Salt Lake or San Diego, or think of another city, Provo. Yeah, bombing and incinerating people. And what did they do? They did nothing. So how are we defending our freedom? Well, we're not. We're destabilizing the Middle East. And Gordon B. Hinckley is not a stupid man. Therefore, why is he going to use advanced sales techniques to convince us that this is okay, when obviously it's cold-blooded murder? And God approves of it. Defending our freedoms. It's unthinkable. equally appalling is the fact that he says, I am proud to be here serving our nation and representing our way of life. Our way of life, invading other helpless countries, massacring thousands and tens of thousands of people to gain conquest when they did nothing at all to us, and we're proud of that. You talked about the British Empire. What about U.S. imperialism? We've got bases all over the world. Why?
There are other mothers, innocent civilians, who cling to their children with fear and look heavenward with desperate pleadings as the earth shakes beneath their feet and deadly rockets scream through the dark sky.
I just love how he differentiates there. There are other mothers who are innocent civilians who are pleading, evidently with their God, for protection, who evidently doesn't care too much, as usual. Innocent civilians, as opposed to what? The guilty husbands, fathers, and young men who are trying to protect their families from the invading forces of the United States? Once again, it's making it sound like the guys that are defending their country, firing anti-aircraft guns at the invading American forces that are obliterating their families, that they're guilty of something for trying to protect themselves against the attacks of the United States, which were completely unwarranted and unprovoked by the Iraqi people, who are being murdered by the tens of thousands as he speaks. Nice one, Gordy.
There have been casualties in this terrible conflict, and there likely will be more. Public protests will likely continue. Leaders of other nations have, in no uncertain terms, condemned the coalition strategy. The question arises, where does the church stand in all of this? First, let it be understood that we have no quarrel with the Muslim people or with those of any other faith. We recognize and teach that all the people of the earth are of the family of God, and as He is our Father, so are we brothers and sisters with family obligations one to another.
Now here comes the reversal technique. He said something that sounds so loving towards all our spiritual family, and now everything of that goes out the window. We're just going to have to be obligated to kill them.
But as citizens, we are all under the direction of our respective national leaders. They have access to greater political and military intelligence than do the people generally. Those in the armed services are under obligation to their respective governments to execute the will of the sovereign. When they joined the military service, they entered into a contract by which they are presently bound and to which they have dutifully responded. One of our articles of faith, which represents an expression of our doctrine, states, we believe in being subject to kings, presidents, rulers, and magistrates, in obeying, honoring, and sustaining the law.
So, we don't have any personal quarrels with people of other religions, even though it's a heavily Muslim area. There are some Christians and some others possibly, but we want to just make sure we don't feel anything bad for you as we murder you. And we're all really, obligated by our religion as well to be good citizens and good Latter-day Saints, following mindlessly our governors, our governing body, our leaders who have greater knowledge than we do. They know that somehow, some way, these bad people were going to attack us, even if they never did. Even if they didn't even have nuclear weapons to protect themselves against us, which our leaders falsely accuse them of. Now, for some reason, they know, and we should trust guys like Dick Cheney and George Bush and the cabinet. Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. We'll just go ahead and murder these people, and I'm sure he'll tell us soon that God won't hold us responsible for doing our civic duty of going and murdering people for no reason at all, other than the fact that, well, they do have control of a lot of oil, and they threatened to introduce the Euro Petro, which could destabilize the United States' ability to control world energy markets. Ooh, and what else? Oh, is that a crime, by the way? Yeah, competition is a sin. John D. Rockefeller. There you go. And they don't have a bank that's part of the central banking system out of Zurich, Switzerland. You know, not part of the Rothschild and Company banks that are controlling Europe and controlling the United States and controlling large areas in Africa, and probably in Asia too. They're not part of the system, you mean? Could that be part of the problem? So that we can establish the world currency, bring all nations into subjugation, and be part of the world banking system? Nah, that's gotta be conspiracy theory. Well, you tell me, why did we invade? Why did we murder all those people, and why is Gordon B. Hinckley justifying it? Because it is cold-blooded murder.
But modern revelation states that we are to renounce war and proclaim peace. In a democracy, we can renounce war and proclaim peace. There is opportunity for dissent. Many have been speaking out and doing so emphatically. That is their privilege. That is their right, so long as they do so legally.
Well, now we're going to get into why it's okay or not okay, that we have to really be careful about protesting, about being against mass murder. I mean, in a democracy, it's our right, right? First of all, in a democracy, you don't have rights. In a republic, you have rights. In democracy, whatever way that the wind blows is the way things go. This wasn't established as a democracy last I checked. And the only people that use that term, unless they're completely ignorant, are people that are promoting globalism. Well, Gordon, you're showing your colors once again.
However, we all must also be mindful of another overriding responsibility, which, I may add, governs my personal feelings and dictates my personal loyalties in the present situation. When war raged between the Nephites and the Lamanites, the record states that the Nephites were inspired by a better cause, for they were not fighting for power, but they were fighting for their homes and their liberties, their wives and their children, and their all. Yea, for their rights of worship and their church. And they were doing that which they felt was duty, which they owed to their God. The Lord counseled them, defend your families, even unto bloodshed. And Moroni rent his coat, and he took a piece thereon, and wrote upon it, in memory of our God, our religion and freedom, and our peace, our wives and our children. And he fastened it upon the end of a pole. And he fastened on his head plate, and his breastplate, and his shields, and girded on his armor about his loins. And he took the pole, which had on the end thereof his rent coat, and he called it the title of liberty. And he bowed himself to the earth.
Now, aside from the topic itself, I want to point out the mind control techniques being used in this activity here. So, Mormons, of course, are conditioned to believe that the Book of Mormon, as it is called, is an actual record of real people who lived upon the American continents. And, of course, these people in the story have their prophets, their leaders. And these prophets and leaders, such as Captain Moroni, etc., which Gordy is referring to, are like unto him, great, valiant heroes in the story, representatives of God, who is supposed to be good, by the way, full of virtue and light and truth and goodness. And so all of these things, all of these characteristics of these imaginary people from the story, which he's going to refer to as an actual record as if they really existed, are representing core values within Mormonism, which are connected to emotional, they're emotional triggers. They trigger our most loyal feelings connected to our desires to stay with our families, to love and bless each other, all those sort of things. So these things have been installed as values, core values, and made integral to our own emotional well-being, to those things that we actually value the most, which are our relationships with family. And so Gordon Hinckley knows exactly what he's doing. He's a master, manipulator through mind control technique. He realizes that he's going to link these feelings of loyalty and love to family and principles which we are taught to believe enable our family to stay together in time and in eternity in LDS theology. He's going to link that to the real world here, as we call it, and what he's trying to get us to identify with and believe. And so he's going to actually take those feelings which are most poignant to Mormons here and attach those to the belief that we are actually defending our freedom in the current situation, where he's pulling this 180, wherein actually the Iraqi people are defending their families against evil invading forces that are wholesale, murdering them and then plundering their country later, obviously, which happens to be the United States Armed Forces, a privately owned conglomerate of companies in the military-industrial complex, which we'll learn about more as we get into greater detail on corporate governance and how that actually works. So he's pulling a 180 here.
And he prayed mightily unto his God for the blessings of liberty to rest upon his brethren.
Wow. So now what he's going to do is go with the follow the prophet mode. He's taken advantage of the fact that so many Latter-day Saints think that this guy actually talks with and for the Hebrew God. And so he's really special. Let's just forget all about the whole Mark Hoffman thing, right? When he had no powers of discernment. Let's trust him, and let's trust George Bush and Dick Cheney. That sounds great. So we have something that's overriding the what? Morality for mass murder, invading and massacring people who have oil and who possibly their government may have threatened the ability of the United States to be the top dog in the energy industry and stand in the way of establishing a world currency for the New World Order. So what is he saying here now? Oh, he starts describing the Iraqi people, that they're trying to defend their families against evil invaders. But wait a minute. He's going to pretend that actually the United States people were being invaded by the Iraqis and defending ourselves and our freedom, our wives and our children and our religion against the invading Iraqi forces. From where? Is he making this stuff up? Last I checked, there wasn't an Iraqi invasion going on.
It is clear from these and other writings that there are times and circumstances when nations are justified, in fact, have an obligation to fight for family, for liberty, and against tyranny, threat, and oppression.
It is clear from these writings. Once again, he's moved a fictional novel into reality as though it's a record of something that actually happened between the invisible guy in the sky, which this and other fictional records, other fictional novels advocate as truth, and now pretending that this is actually history that we can build upon, when the whole thing is fiction to start with. Building false bricks upon false foundations.
When all is said and done, we of this church are people of peace. We are followers of our Redeemer, the Lord Jesus Christ.
So this is amazing, that this level of dishonesty from Gordon B. Hinckley is just incredible. He's going on and on as if the United States has been attacked by the people of Iraq. He's in some sort of a fantasy land. It sounds like he said, we love peace, we follow Jesus Christ, but we're ready to defend our families from tyranny, threat, and oppression. Okay, and so we're going to go wage a war of aggression and invade Iraq and mass murder their people with the huge American war machine? Where is this guy getting this tyranny, threat, and oppression? Oh, could there be oppression over there? You know, I mean, their government is not what the United States wants, so they're going to replace it? Well, what kind of government they have in Russia or China or North Korea? Is the United States going to invade every place, Cuba, that they don't like the government suddenly? They're pretending this has something to do with a threat to U.S. security, and there's been no aggression whatsoever by the Iraqis towards the U.S. people. So everything he's saying is as if he's referencing something that hasn't occurred at all. He's such a liar, it's unbelievable. And he's justifying mass murder. This man is sick. And he's an Amalekite upon the tower. Clearly, how can people look at what listen to what he's saying and look at what the facts are, and then act as if this man is representing something good when he's promoting this extreme wickedness and excusing, filthy Bush and Cheney in this war of aggression?
Who is the Prince of Peace. But even he said, "Think not that I am come to send peace on earth. I came not to send peace, but a sword." This places us in the position of those who long for peace, who teach peace, who work for peace, but who also are citizens of nations and are subject to the laws of our government. Furthermore, we are a freedom-loving people, committed to the defense of liberty wherever it is in jeopardy. I believe that God will not hold men and women in uniform responsible as agents of their government in carrying forward that which they are legally obligated to do. It may even be that He will hold us responsible if we try to impede or hedge up the way of those who are involved in a contest with forces of evil and repression.
So this guy's literally on another planet at this point. He's acting as if the Iraqi people have staged an invasion or attacked someone, which is not the case. He says Jesus is on the side of doing this, and Jesus said he came to destroy peace. to take peace from the earth. Jesus wants us to do this, to attack a nation that was at peace, not harming anyone. He cites oppression and acts like the U.S. people are the world police force, which is completely against, was it the Monroe Doctrine? I mean, why would we be interventionist? And the best thing we can do for these people is to mass murder thousands and thousands of them because maybe they'll wind up with a better government. What do we got, like 17 years later? And we've destroyed their country. Hinckley, you are sick. A sick person and a liar. Unbelievable. And Jesus wants us to do it, and if we get in the way, then we're doing something wrong. If we object, if we wage a demonstration or speak out against mass murder, he's accused these people of what? So if you accuse someone long enough, that means they're guilty of something? Is that it? And so it's okay to go and mass murder people and invade a country like the U.S. does time after time, destabilizing governments all over the world, especially in the Middle East and Latin America? This is just beyond belief. How is it that people are going to look at this and not... Is it because he tempers his words and acts like, well, you know, we care about people, and we hate that we have to do this. Let's be nice to these people while we're killing them. We'll even pray for them. That'll do it.
Now, there is much that we can and must do in these perilous times. We can give our opinions on the merits of the situation as we see it, but never let us become a party to words or works of evil concerning our brothers and sisters in various nations on one side or the other. Political differences never justify hatred or ill will. I hope that the Lord's people may be at peace one with another during times of trouble, regardless of what loyalties they may have to different governments or parties. Let us pray for those who are called upon to bear arms by their respective governments and plead for the protection of heaven upon them, that they may return to their loved ones in safety. To our brothers and sisters in harm's way, we say that we pray for you. We pray that the Lord will watch over you and preserve you from injury, and that you may return home and pick up your lives again. We know that you are not in that land of blowing sand and brutal heat because you enjoy the games of war. The strength of your commitment is measured by your willingness to give your very lives for that in which you believe.
I'd like us to pay attention to the technique that Gordon is using, the technique, as well as the message that he delivers within the technique. So notice the cadence. Notice that he will hypnotically slow down and bring us to a feeling of calm as he begins to talk more and more about Jesus Christ, our Redeemer. Hinckley says it is clear from these and other writings that there are times and circumstances when nations are justified, in fact have an obligation to fight for family, for liberty, and against tyranny, threat, and oppression. None of those are coming from the Iraqis at this point. And he says we're followers of Jesus Christ, but then he says that Jesus says, "Think not that I am come to send peace on earth. I came not to send peace, but a sword." Why would he say that? What's that about? That's the turnaround again. He says Jesus is loving, and then he says, but even though Jesus is loving, he said he came not to bring peace, but a sword. Wow, that's quite a technique, huh? That teaches us to justify doing the opposite of what is right. It's a fantastic sales tool. And he knows exactly what he's doing.
We know that some have died and others may yet die in this hot and deadly contest, we can do all in our power to comfort and bless those who lose loved ones. May those who mourn be comforted with that comfort which comes alone from Christ the Redeemer. It was he who said to his beloved disciples, "Let not your heart be troubled. Ye believe in God. Believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you, that where I am, there ye may be also. Peace I leave with you. My peace I give unto you. Not as the world giveth, give I unto you. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid." We call upon the Lord, whose strength is mighty and whose powers are infinite, to bring an end to the conflict, an end that will result in a better life for all concerned. The Lord has declared, "For I, the Lord, rule in the heavens above and among the armies of the earth." We can hope and pray for that glorious day foretold by the prophet Isaiah, when men shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore.
So in the end, everything will work out. The Lord is in control. He rules in the armies of the nations. That's what he said. And in the end, we pray that the lives will be blessed of everyone involved. In other words, America and her great armies are going to go in and free people from repression. The thousands and thousands of people that are killed along the way, it's too bad, but that's just collateral damage. This is the work of God. And eventually, Mormonism will be preached in these countries thanks to the war in the name of Jesus Christ. Oops, I almost got caught up in it myself.
Even in an evil world, we can so live our lives as to merit the protecting care of our Father in heaven. We can be as the righteous, living among the evils of Sodom and Gomorrah. Abraham pleaded that these cities might be spared for the sake of the righteous. And above all, we can cultivate in our own hearts and proclaim to the world the salvation of the Lord Jesus Christ. Through his atoning sacrifice, we are certain life will continue beyond the veil of death. We can teach that gospel, which will lead to the exaltation of the obedient. Even when the armaments of war ring out in deathly serenade, and darkness and hatred reign in the hearts of some, there stands immovable, reassuring, comforting, and with great outreaching love, the quiet figure of the Son of God, the Redeemer of the world. We can proclaim with Paul, "For I am persuaded that neither death nor life, nor angels nor principalities, nor powers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor height, nor depth, nor any other creature shall be able to separate us from the love of God, which is in Christ Jesus our Lord." This life is but a chapter in the eternal plan of our Father. It is full of conflict and seeming incongruities. Some die young, some live to old age. We cannot explain it, but we accept it with a certain knowledge that through the atoning sacrifice of our Lord, we shall all go on living, and this with the comforting assurance of his immeasurable love. He has said, "Learn of me and listen to my words. Walk in the meekness of my spirit, and ye shall have peace in me." And there, my brothers and sisters, we rest our faith. Regardless of the circumstances, we have the comfort and peace of Christ our Savior, our Redeemer, the living Son of the living God. I so testify in his holy name, even the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Now, what he's doing here is it's masterful, and he does know what he's doing. So, although you may be offended with me if you're a true believer still at this point, I can understand that. I've been there. However, what Gordon is using, he's not only repetitive in going over and over with, hitting you with aspects of the belief system, but he's also using hypnotic repetition and hypnotic voice inflection, his cadence. He's actually moving you towards a state of relaxation, more likely to give you feelings of peace as he continuously repeats over and over words of reassurance in the belief system that Jesus Christ is your Redeemer, and he'll make it all okay despite all these tragic circumstances. Just believe in Jesus, and it'll all work out in the end. We'll all be resurrected, and all this injustice from these terrible circumstances, which of course he's blaming on everybody that it's not from, well, it'll all work out somehow. Just believe in Christ, believe in Jesus Christ, our Redeemer. Yeah, well, he is a master manipulator, and if you study the mind control techniques, hypnotic language, the NLP, the things that Gordon is doing knowingly, when you can recognize it, then perhaps it will be appalling to you. So how similar is it when these leaders of the church castigate people who speak out against them, who call a spade a spade? How powerful is their influence when they name call, when they label with loaded terms, anti-Mormon, apostate? Don't listen to them, they're minions of Satan. Are you feeling like I'm a minion of Satan? According to your programming, you might be. Now think about it, where does that come from? Have I said something that was not true? Or did Gordon B. Hinckley make good appear evil and evil appear good? So whatever your viewpoint is, if you're taking your information from someone whose paycheck is written by one of these large concerns, then you can count on the fact that you're getting a spin, including if it was O'Reilly or Sean Hannity or Rush Limbaugh or any of these guys that you think are endorsing some sort of conservative values which you may associate with Mormonism or Christianity to be good versus, in your black and white world, the opposite is supposed to be represented by Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton or someone who's considered, a raging liberal. When in fact, although some of you may know it, all of these people are going to be influenced through the Council on Foreign Relations. But it goes much, much deeper than that. This is much, much deeper than you get with the portion of that you get along with some spin from people like Ezra Taft Benson or the John Birch Society in days of yore. You get a portion and then you get some spin. Because in the end, it seems that they're all connected to sources that are manipulating us. Sources that have or maybe you think, yeah, I've gone beyond that. I'm not into O'Reilly and Hannity, but I've got better sources like Newsmax, Judicial Watch, the Heritage Foundation. They're true patriots. Better think again. Sorry. Even Phyllis Schlafly was associated with the organization's sister organization, possibly, of the Knights of Malta. So, nope. Not Sister, not Phyllis Schlafly, not Ron Paul. Sorry, people. They're all linked. If you think that Bernie Sanders, if you're on the more liberal side of things, if you think he was calling them out, talking about those nasty corporations, don't forget he went to go visit the Pope. They're all actors. You think Donald Trump is the real thing? The media was trying to destroy him. Did you fall for that one? The media elected him. He's a Zionist. Look at who he and his father have associated with. Look at his lack of morality. Look at his where he spent his money with political donations. Look at his own. The guy was a Democrat, for crying out loud, and he runs as a Republican. I mean, he talks about God now. Before that, he bragged about, doing things under the table to other guys' wives. I mean, he was worse than Joseph Smith. Well, I don't know if he was worse. That's hard to do. Speaking of Trump, didn't he actually admit that he's taking a foreign policy consultation from like Richard Haas, head of the CFR? I mean, give me a break. You watch Hillary talking about going down the street to talk to the people in the council, or Dick Cheney, but Haas advises Trump. So there you go. They're all birds of a flat feather. No wonder we see Hillary sitting on Donald Trump's back in the ring doing their comedy routine.
But I look out at this audience filled with not only many friends and colleagues, but people who have served in prior administrations. And so there is never a time when the inbox is not full. Thank you very much, Richard, and I am delighted to be here in these new headquarters. I have been often to, the mothership in New York City, but it's good to have an outpost of the council right here down the street from the State Department. We get a lot of advice from the council, so this will mean I won't have this far to go to be told what we should be doing and how we should think about the future.
It's good to be back at the Council on Foreign Relations. As Pete mentioned, I've been a member for a long time and was actually a director for some period of time. I never mentioned that when I was campaigning for re-election.
Because indeed, much of it is a show for us. The illusion that these people are enemies of each other in many cases is indeed that, an illusion. They can represent different political parties, and behind the scenes they're pals. Remember when Bush Sr. and was it Bill Clinton were getting together, talking to us, them and maybe Jimmy Carter, all talking about what was the disaster in Indonesia. They were on the way to it before it hit, I mean, were they not? Some fleet was or something. It's ridiculous. Reminds me of a conversation I had with an attorney for a particular central bank of a particular country, and we were visiting, and he said, yeah, these guys, it's really funny because they appear in different heads of different political parties, and in the background, they've got like family intermarriage, they've got corporations that they actually are, all part of in businesses behind the scenes, and it's ridiculous, the facade that the people get. They must laugh at us, saying, can you believe I pulled that one off and they actually swallowed it? Maybe kind of going a little deep into another rabbit hole, but just on the subject of that, meeting up these guys that are movers and shakers and having these conversations, which seems kind of weird because I'm like not I'm a nobody in their world, of course, but somehow I've just had these really unusual experiences meeting up with people in positions of power. And I met up with a guy
we happened upon each other, who was way higher up than the other fellow, who was, in other words, the one guy was an attorney for a central bank for a particular nation. And then this other guy I met up with, not far away in terms of time from that, was much, much higher up in the food chain. And he was involved with, global banking and so forth. And we got on this conversation. And so at the time, he actually asked my opinion. I don't know why, but for some reason, it's not like he didn't. I know he knows, what was going on intricately in terms of operations with global banking and so forth. And so he asked me what was my take on, the cause of the crisis, or at least, how it was going to go. I think he was not just he wasn't asking about the cause. He was asking me about what were my thoughts on the way things were going to go in the nation where the cause, where things were instigated, which was basically with the subprime mortgage crisis, where the global financial crisis seemed to originate, as far as the impetus for things going just with that chain reaction that caused so much turmoil in financial worlds and caused an enormous consolidation in the banking institutions in the United States, where banks were just gobbled up by the huge ones. And I indicated that I was aware that it was definitely a planned event, and I shared with him a few details of how that occurred and how obvious it is if you understand anything about how some of these things work on the secondary market and so forth. And that Geithner definitely had plenty of data available to him on what was going to occur ahead of time, and then for the Fed in the United States to bump interest rates up when they had enormous amounts of subprime mortgages that had huge margins on them that would just absolutely explode and double people's payments, and when they raised the short-term rates. In other words, people whose rates would have gone up and couldn't refinance out because the values were beginning to drop instead of raise, so they no longer would make it in terms of loan to value, and would have their rates go up quite a bit. However, the Fed for 2 years raised interest rates at that time so that these short-term rates, instead of someone jumping from a 6% to, say, a 9% interest rate, would wind up at 11% or something. They'd have LIBOR plus 5, ridiculous. I mean they had, and so they raised LIBOR by 2 percentage points during that time, and they had these outrageous or LIBOR plus 7 instead of LIBOR plus 2 3/4, 2 1/4, something on that you'd get on an A paper loan. So these loans were going to explode, but they made them explode so much higher and ensured the foreclosures to occur. They made certain that so many people would default that might have otherwise hung on. And they cited as their reasoning, we're concerned about inflation, so we'll just raise interest rates. Well, what they did is they destroyed the housing industry, and they knew it. These people are not stupid. So the guy says, he says, interesting conspiracy theory. If your Fed in your country was, making extra money off of this, I would be getting some of the money. I should be, at least. And I thought, who the hell is this guy? And, he'd given me his name, and I looked him up later. And he sat on all kinds of boards. He's board of directors, CEO, huge companies in Europe. And, in addition to the huge banking position that he held within a particular enormous transnational financial corporation, not the World Bank, but he had been talking about things that were associated with either the World Bank or the Bank of International Settlements in Zurich. I think it's in Zurich. So I looked this guy up and I go, how in the world did I meet this guy when we talk about this? So anyway, interesting. Yeah, so guys like Timothy Geithner knew darn well what was going on. They had tremendous amounts of data coming in as to, the market share of these particular types of loans that were disseminated, that were just marketed and allowed to be marketed with terms that allowed for people's payments to double, essentially. And then the Fed did everything they could to exacerbate the problem and create massive amounts of foreclosures, which, of course, destroyed, subprime value of subprime mortgage securities and instigated this entire crisis that spread globally through all types of financial markets, and allowed the huge banks to gobble up the banks that they bankrupted. And then you had, companies like, Chase Manhattan, who was huge in the wholesale market, and even beyond the wholesale market, supplying the wholesalers, shut down or limit the warehouse lines so that these other companies couldn't fund their loans, who were their competition in the wholesale market. Then they pulled out of wholesale and just they obliterated. I mean, there were like 50 companies a day shutting down for a while, and Chase was ruthless. And even as huge as they are, they had to merge, with J.P. Morgan to withstand what was going on. And I'm sure that they sold off a lot of their subprime securities as quickly as they could. Anyway, I don't want to diverge too hard into this, but what I'm saying is that globally things are manipulated, and these people know each other, and they are networked, and the public knows so little, and are trained to believe words like we hear from Donald Trump, that it's all an accident, or that we have stupid people leading us, and it's, things that happen like that are not mistakes. They're calculated. These people know what they are doing. They understand the ramifications of what is done in secondary markets and that sort of a thing. All this was manipulated, and many things are manipulated, just like the wars we get into. And they're all for profit, believe me. When you understand that everything is commerce, and everything that you thought was public is actually privately owned, it'll begin to make a lot more sense. I guess maybe I'll throw one more gem in here. I try to be vague about these kind of things, but so I was with this guy, and he just needed to get some stuff done. So we wandered into this. We didn't wander. Anyway, we happened to be at a particular institution, shall we say, and he was trying to get something done. In case it's of interest to some folks, he had one droopy eyelid, and his family was involved with people that were, known globally for global influence, shall I say. Anyway, he's trying to get something done at a local branch of a large financial concern, and he wasn't getting cooperation from some gal who was, I don't know, kind of maybe she would be middle management at the local branch, and at any rate, he tapped off something on his phone there. This was a while back, before we had texting, I think. So anyway, this gal gets a tap on the shoulder, or desk phone rings or something. I don't remember exactly what the impetus was, but she excused herself and went into a little office or something. And I said to him, "It doesn't look like things are going too well for you." And he says something along the lines of, "I'm pretty sure things are going to work out just fine for what I'm trying to accomplish here." So anyway, the lady comes back and she's quivering, she's shaking, she's stuttering, and she says, "Whatever it is, sir, whatever you want, just tell me again, and I'll take care of that." So we leave after that, and I'm like, what happened there? How did that happen? You seem to know things were going to work out for you. He goes, "Yeah, well, when things weren't going too well, I sent an email to my dad. He used to own this bank. This was a national bank, by the way." He goes, "So he knows the president." And this happened in a couple of minutes. So you want to talk about connected? I don't know what was said to that woman, but she looked like it was more than her job that she was afraid of happening. I can't say that that's for sure the case, but she was shaking when she came out, and extremely cooperative. He was very polite. "Well, thank you for your cooperation, ma'am. I appreciate that." I'm like, good God, what the hell is going on here? These people are so powerful, it's unbelievable. So when you felt like you needed to reject some material or not listen to somebody, well, many times the reason for that is not what you thought it was. It's not the Holy Spirit. However, I plan to show you that what you've experienced as mind control techniques
and manipulation of people's belief systems within the LDS Church is only a microcosm of what goes on a much larger scale worldwide, not only within other religions, but, as I was saying, in social manipulation on a much, much larger scale. And you're probably blind to it, just like you were blind to it in the LDS Church, or SDA, or JW, or others. The church has done things that the media has done in downgrading certain areas, in our view, actually trying to relegate certain groups, certain secret and secretive societies, into the realm of urban legend, such as the Danites within the church, such as the Illuminati within the context of society in general, and to move Freemasonry more to just a common fraternal organization rather than the place that it holds as a meeting ground for so many secretive and secret societies and people that are movers and shakers within government, within NGOs, finance, all sorts of things, and religion.
So, if you've bailed the church, if you're an ex-mo, okay, you may have read some stuff from Steve Hassan and said, you know what, the Mormons, the JW, Scientology, Moonies, they're all doing mind control techniques. If you're in the church, if you're one of the people that were like me, that studied the Book of Mormon, that took seriously the things in it regarding secret combinations, and were trying to protect the freedom of the American nation, then you might just say, well, we have noticed tactics that are used in the liberal media, CNN maybe, MSNBC, but we think Fox News is okay. Unless you've noticed that, Rupert Murdoch was a Bilderberger, and News Corp is basically run by his family still. If you follow the money trail in any of these, whoever writes the paycheck is in control, and that's where we get to corporate governance. Corporate governance is something I really did not know about. If you think, well, I know what corporations are, and they're too involved in the United States, you know what? This is much more than what many people would imagine that corporate governance is. This isn't just a bunch of, heavy-duty businesses that you recognize from Wall Street having too much influence with lobbyists and so forth in Washington, D.C. This is not about that. A lot of this is really going to be about following the money trail. For instance, if you think you're going to get, good information, reliable from, someone like, say, Alex Jones, look at where his paycheck comes from. Look at these huge media conglomerates. Learn about corporate governance in this video, and you'll know that he's got to be a shill. Mark Dice was on Fox News. Look at the money trail. If they write the paycheck, they're going to be in control of what comes out in the media. So a lot of this is disinformation that goes out with regard to a lot of stuff that we would put in the, what are you going to call it, the conspiracy field of thought. Yeah, and there are reasons for that. There are definitely reasons for that. But what we are going to do is connect people, and we're going to show financial reports that are extremely concrete. This isn't going to be in the realm of theory so much as it's going to be in the realm of establishing connections and showing an actual system in the money trail. Corporate governance is something I really did not know about. If you think, well, I know what corporations are and they're too involved in the United States, you know what? This is much more than what many people would imagine that corporate governance is. This isn't just a bunch of businesses that you recognize from Wall Street having too much influence with lobbyists and so forth in Washington, D.C. This is not about that. This is a completely eclipsing subject. So what I want you to know is that you may have noticed mind control tactics being used, or you may have no clue as to what it is at all. You may be able to recognize it in the media, or you may just think, oh, that's something from the movies. A lot of people do. Once you learn to recognize it, and I've identified some of these things in a couple of videos regarding Mormonism, like Mormonism and the Jehovah's Witnesses and so forth, recent video I released on that. I've done about 3 that had to do with mind control being used in religious organizations and other cults. So don't flip out if I use the word cult. All religions, basically all organized religions, fit the definition of a cult. I know Christians don't like it. They just want to call Mormons and SDA and the JWs cults, and the Moonies and Scientologists, because they are more culty than, a small non-denominational church or something. But I'm going to link things together here. I'm going to link together things that will show you involvement in secret societies and secretive societies, things that go much beyond what you've been trained to believe they are about. We have been trained in the church to reject people who say anything that goes against the brethren. They're discredited, apostate, anti-Mormon. We've been trained in the media to reject people that say secretive societies are involved in governing the world. Why, they're paranoid New World Order freaks. They're conspiracy theorists. Notice the word theory, instantly discrediting, degrading the value of information. They're theorists. Adam God theory, as we degrade Brigham Young a little bit, discrediting. He didn't say it was a theory. He said, this is the way it is. Adam was God. Okay, but that's just an example of using language to manipulate your thoughts, to discredit, to devalue what people have to say that go against a particular organization that's in power. It is done in many churches, and it's easily demonstrable, and I've done that in videos, and other people do it in books and videos, and it's there. All I got to do is look for it, learn about it. So we see a handshake here that is claimed to be a Freemasonic handshake, and it looks awfully close to something that a lot of LDS people will recognize. And if we go through here, we will see, and I'm going to show a lot of people using handshakes, satanic symbols, things that are linking people together. Well, there's Barack, and there's Anton LaVey. We're going to link together political leaders with business leaders, with religious leaders, with banking leaders. And we're going to show corporate governance, which is something I said I knew nothing about until this last year about. And it basically circumvents what you believe is a representative government in what is supposed to be or billed as a constitutional republic, even though we're conditioned by certain of these people to call it a democracy, which was condemned by the founders of America. It's completely circumvented through corporate governance. It's mind-blowing. I got really good information in here. Most of it is borrowed from somebody who did a much longer presentation on that, where you can go to see more, but I've got some really important excerpts here. We're going to link people together with groups that are very influential, and you've been trained to reject as heretical, as lunacy, as something without credibility from whatever angle it is. In the church, we've been more and more programmed to go along with a more liberal agenda and a politically correct agenda, and there are reasons for that. If you've noticed, the church has changed its tune on a lot of things. It's much different than it was 40 years ago or so. Much different indeed. Has God changed his mind? Well, I hope we've gotten past a little bit of prejudice, prejudging, filters that have been installed through the church, to some groups, to the media, for probably everyone, except for those few who realize that the media and the educational system is more of an indoctrination system, but are still thinking, we're going to get our call to go back to Jackson County. The Lord is in charge. Yeah. Everything that President Benson said was true, and J. Reuben Clark. We don't know what's wrong with these fallen leaders that seem to be cooperating with guys like Dick Cheney, George Bush. Why do we have all these Mormons in the NSA, the CIA, and the FBI? Oh, because they're so trustworthy. That's why they are card dealers in Las Vegas. At some point, you wake up and say, there's some inconsistencies here with the story. There's some things that just don't look right at church. or there's some things in our society that just look like they're a little bit too linked together. Why are all these people doing these satanic signs? Okay, ending this clip and running in for the next one. Hope you're on board. You will learn a lot, depending on how much you don't know. And I bet most of you don't know about corporate governance. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is founded on the premise that God has restored the fullness of the gospel in the latter days, that families can be together forever. But what about the Book of Mormon? What about secret combinations, lusting for power, gain, and glory? The conspiracy to destroy the freedom of all lands, nations, and people in the latter days is told in Ether chapter 8. What about that? Have we forgotten the prophecies concerning America, secret societies, and the prophecies of the destruction of the American Republic, that its constitution would hang by a thread, but be rescued by the boys from the mountains, the elders of Israel, from this wicked combination, which would have great power in the latter days, prophesied by them of old, as we are told, and translated by Joseph Smith Jr.? What about these secret alliances, these secret combinations? We don't hear much about it these days. We used to when Ezra Taft Benson was around. All right, let's move into a new segment here.
Auditor General of the United States said during this interview, "The big lie. The government is not a corporation, I assure you." When I heard this come out of Mr. Walker's mouth, I nearly laughed. Apparently, he thought I wouldn't follow up on this little talk we had, but he was wrong. And the first person to receive this documentary will be Mr. David Walker. After all, he gave me his card and asked for more information. So here it is, Dave. Let's start with my own town, Salt Lake City, in the great state of Utah, very near to where this interview took place. I was sent a letter not too long ago for a parking violation that I never received from the Salt Lake City Law Department. Here now is a picture of that letter. Now you'll notice that the first thing you see is that this letter is indeed from the Salt Lake City Corporation. This is the government of the city of Salt Lake, and it doesn't really get any plainer than that. Now, in the first paragraph, it states that I am in default on the debt which I owe to the Salt Lake City Corporation, which they have cleverly nicknamed the City for outstanding parking fines. The city, meaning the corporation or municipality, acting on behalf of the city, demands that I pay the entire amount due, plus what I'm assuming is a late fee no later than 10 days from the date of this letter. And as we read on, after numerous threats of retaliation, the confiscation or theft of my vehicle, and a negative ding on my credit rating, the Salt Lake City Corporation actually has the nerve to tell me to please govern myself accordingly. Then they tell me that I can't pay this bill in cash, and that I'm supposed to make my check payable to the Salt Lake City Corporation. Now, if you don't comprehend the tyrannical, corporate fascist nature of this threatening letter, perhaps this will help. When I did a search on the internet for information on the Salt Lake City Corporation, this page came up in the results. And there in the description section it states, the Salt Lake City Corporation is a private company, categorized under fire protection, local government, and located in Salt Lake City, Utah. So my city government is a private corporation? Not public, but private? Translation, the former comptroller general lied through his bold, crooked, smiling face. Further down in the description box, it states that the location type for the Salt Lake City Corporation is a branch. A branch? Trees have branches, all connected to one large trunk. But wait a minute, what other businesses have branches? How about banks? I bank with Wells Fargo at one of their local banking branches. This simply means that this is one of hundreds of sub-corporate hubs which all link to the mother corporation, or the tree trunk, that is Wells Fargo Bank, the main corporation. And in truth, Wells Fargo Bank is probably connected to another mother corporation.
You know, while he's mentioning Wells Fargo Bank, we might want to think about this Fed Bank being named after Mariner Eccles. He was Fed chairman back in 1933. You know, the Eccles family, the Mormon Illuminati family, as some people refer to them as. You've probably seen the influence of the Eccles at the University of Utah. Well, the Fed building is named after Mariner Eccles, who had
significant banking interests later in his life in Utah, and apparently their family merged with the Wells Fargo banking concerns. You know, Wells Fargo, the one with the criminal activities, creating all those fake accounts recently. Yeah, that's the Eccles family, and many others, of course, are heavily invested in the bank. Maybe Warren Buffett, doesn't he own like 9%? So, Mariner Eccles, yeah, he helped engineer things with, was it Roosevelt to rob the people of their gold in 1933? After only 20 years of the Fed bankers basically controlling the monetary flow and policy in the United States, created the absolute huge depression, which consolidated so much money to so few people, made so much money for those who were in the know. People like Joseph Kennedy, whose net worth went from, say, about $1 million to $100 million back then, and that's when $100 million was worth a lot more than it is today. So the people in the know take advantage of the consolidations in banking because they are orchestrated by guys like these, guys like Mariner Eccles, famous Latter-day Saint, mover and shaker in Utah, and in financing or the financial concerns of the building the New World Order in the land of America. There you got Greenspan, Bernanke, a hall of shame, huh? They're missing a few guys there like Brzezinski and Volcker, and we must be fair and consider the value of Janet Yellen. It's one of the most talented double talkers I've ever heard. So you might say that the Eccles family is to the University of Utah as the Marriotts are to BYU. Huge movers and shakers in the system, in the society, in Utah, and in the corporations called the United States, and in the banking world globally.
Does this mean that the Salt Lake City Police Department is owned by a private company, considering the reference to the Salt Lake City Corporation's law department? Have our police become nothing more than corporate security, there to protect and serve the corporate interests of the city and state? The real question is, how can a government be a branch of another corporation? Is Salt Lake City just a sub-corporate hub under another larger corporation? Well, needless to say, this really threw me for a loop, and so I decided to look at other governments within the great state of Utah. And I found something very interesting. Here is an official website for the United States District Court for the state of Utah. The problem is, it doesn't refer to Utah as a state. Instead, it recognizes Utah only as a district.
In the church, we've been conditioned to accept things on faith. We've been conditioned to accept things at face value in the media, on the news, in education, and at church. We have to start asking ourselves questions, using our critical thinking or analysis. Now, if you live in Salt Lake City and you're returning to Jackson County, we know that it took the Saints months to walk that distance, several months. Okay, if you're going like 17 miles a day, 6 days a week, that's 100 miles a week. So if it's about 1,500 miles, do the math there. You've got 15 weeks. That's almost 3.5 months, 4 months to get from Salt Lake to Jackson County, Missouri. If you were walking. Now, if you were, let's say, in Orange County, California, it would take you about 2 months to walk to Salt Lake, plus another 3 months or 4 months to walk to Jackson County, Missouri. What if you were in Buenos Aires, Argentina? Well, then at that pace, you're taking over 2 years to walk there. At some point, we look at this and we say, this doesn't really work out too well, especially if you've been, converted to the gospel and the church in, southern Argentina or Chile or Cape Town, South Africa. So when our story has to adapt in order to remain believable, does that bring into question if it was true in the first place? Is this a problem with rational thinking? We can see this in the Jehovah's Witnesses. prime example of how this works. They said only 144,000 people were going to be exalted. We'll use that term, saved, go to heaven. Well, then they reached 144,000. It wasn't going to help their missionary effort any to continue with this story. So now you've got the heaven on earth people with an unlimited number. The story has to change because when we do some rational thinking, there are problems. We're going to look at some historical events in the same light, in the same way, use our ability to think. So, I'm going to blow the lid off some of the LDS view of the history of America and the projected and past history of America from the LDS viewpoint, traditional viewpoint. And this all is part of my deconstructing reality to find everything is what it isn't. Is that an Alice in Wonderland quote? Physical evidence. This isn't like theory, okay? Actually,
Joseph Smith said that the Book of Mormon was the keystone of our religion and the most correct book on earth. This most correct book on earth states that the downfall of two great American civilizations came as a result of secret conspiracies whose desire was to overthrow the freedom of the people. And they have caused the destruction of this people of whom I am now speaking, says Moroni, and also the destruction of the people of Nephi. Now, undoubtedly, Moroni could have pointed out many factors that led to the destruction of the people. But notice how he singled out the secret combinations, just as the church today could point out many threats to peace, prosperity, and the spread of God's work, that has singled out the greatest threat as the great conspiracy. There is no conspiracy theory in the Book of Mormon. It is a conspiracy fact.
So Ezra Taft Benson says that the Book of Mormon and the prophets in the Book of Mormon, interestingly, state or focus on the main problem or main concern that they'd like to warn us about happens to be these secret combinations. And he says, and isn't it interesting that the first presidency or the church, is warning us about that? Well, guess what? They're not doing that anymore, Ezra. Is it because they're in it? Then again, for that matter, Ezra, it's rather ironic that Joseph Smith formed secret combinations himself, patterned after illuminated Freemasonry, which he published in the Book of Mormon. Joseph Smith founded the Council of 50, which anointed him king over all the earth. And Joseph Smith undoubtedly formed, but we know he was at least head of, the Danites, though the church leaders would have us believe otherwise. The Danites testify that Rigdon and Hiram and Joseph were at their head, not Samson Avard. Now, why would he do that if he knew they were evil and was translating records which said how bad they were? Why would he actually be forming his own secret combinations that he had warned about?
And along this line, I would highly recommend to you a new book entitled None Dare Call It, Conspiracy by Gary Allen. Then Moroni speaks to us in this day and says, Wherefore the Lord commandeth you, when ye shall see these things come among you, that ye shall awake to a sense of your awful situation, because this secret combination which shall be among you. The Book of Mormon further warns that whatever nation shall uphold such secret combinations to get power and gain until they shall spread over the nation, behold, they shall be destroyed.
Well, Ezra, I read that book right about that time, and it was a good introduction to organizations like the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateralists, and David Rockefeller, and then the Rothschilds and Warburgs, and those sorts of people. But I learned that things were much deeper rooted in the occult, in Freemasonry, and in Illuminism.
When our founders declared a new order of the ages, when soldiers died in wave upon wave for a union based on liberty, they were acting on an ancient hope that is meant to be fulfilled. And after 1989, President Bush said, and it's a phrase that I often use myself, that we needed a new world order. And instead, it looks like we got a lot of...
Well, we heard what Bill Clinton had to say about the Bohemian Club with Scowcroft, Kissinger, and the boys go to. Now, they mentioned Hillary being a witch, but Bill Clinton used the witchcraft language in his famous speech where he called for the forcing of the spring. If you do a little research on that, you will discover witchcraft in his speech. Nice picture with Hillary and Trump, huh? You think he'd really put her in jail? Were they really rivals? Were they? Or is it a show? Now let's examine another thought. In the Book of Mormon, we read much about the Gadianton Band, a secret society, an oath-bound secret society that manipulates the people, that manipulates the society through advancing its numbers, advancing its members in positions of authority in society, in the government, the judgeship, and it would follow, just as it is done today, in education, in the media, and so on and so forth. We also have the prophecies in the Book of Mormon which state that we would have a secret combination which was to become extremely powerful, that would seek to overthrow the people, to subjugate all people in all lands, to take down the freedom of all nations, lands, and people of the entire earth, and that it would be focused in America, is what is inferred. It says, among you Gentiles. This is in Ether, chapter 8. So we're specifically told to be expecting a secret society or network of secret societies to be very powerful in taking control of society. And we are warned that we must not allow it to happen.
Well, conspiracies or secret combinations in the latter days are pretty evident if you do a little looking around. Looking from side to side like Obama is as he flashes the goat's head. But Joseph Smith, whether you think he was a prophet or not, had other ways of being connected. You see, Albert Pike wasn't necessarily a prophet, though he's foretold 3 world wars, and the first 2 seem to be pretty well according to the pattern that he said they would be based upon. Now, why is that? Well, in the right secret societies, you know what's going to happen ahead of time if your people are causing it. So it can make you look like a darn good prophet predicting things to happen when you've already got the blueprint.
This is not conspiracy theory, and not all conspiracies are theories. Probably most of them are not. Proofs of Conspiracy was a really good book I read a long time ago. It was written probably a couple hundred years ago on certain secret societies and so forth. So here we go. A little bit of my background. Did not grow up in the church, but shortly before I became acquainted with the church and joined it, I got involved learning about threats to the freedom of the American Republic, and I was doing a lot of studying. So we learned a lot of things, and I learned about group persuasion, coercive persuasion, sometimes called groupthink or other names, and the tactics used by the media and the so-called educational system to manipulate people. And I read a lot of books, about constitutional republic stuff, and I also started reading stuff, the prophecies in the church, and many people probably noticed those things, like Ether chapter 8 about the secret combination that would be working to destroy the freedom of the Gentiles here and of all nations, subjugate everyone under a tyrannical world government of Satanism. Basically, it's in the Book of Mormon, it's basically in the Book of Revelations. So if you're a person that believes that the Book of Mormon is inspired, then this is easily making sense. If you're not, and you said, hey, Joseph Smith was faking it, getting off this brown rock and all that sort of a thing, you have to ask yourself some questions. The Freemasonry that he wrote into the Book of Mormon was before he was a Freemason, and it was more than just, Blue Lodge stuff. He wrote in Illuminism. He discussed plans to subjugate all mankind under a world order. So where did he get this from? Well, those are questions that people, where he got the Book of Mormon from is debated hotly, and I'm not going to go deep into that at all. I'm not trying to prove one way or another. What I am saying is that he had information that has proven to be correct
as far as illuminated Freemasonry is concerned, and many people hold him to be a prophet because of that, especially. However, Sidney Rigdon was living near some Rosicrucian monks who would have had access to this sort of knowledge. And who knows how high in the Masonic order Joseph's father was? I really don't know. But the fact remains, these orders do exist, and when we see the letters written by Albert Pike to Giuseppe Manzini discussing 3 world wars and how they would be waged and who would be involved, and the first 2 have taken place, very much like he said, and then the third was going to be a conflict between Islam and Christianity. Not that it was bringing on the end of the world, but that it was actually bringing on the goals of the United Nations, which hadn't even come into being yet. They actually, of course, they got started about exactly 100 years after Joseph Smith sent Elder Orson Hyde to Israel to dedicate the land for the return of the Jews. So this gets interesting. Whether you believe Joseph Smith's a prophet or not, there's really important information in here, because we're going to see how religion plays a big part in this, and merging into a single religion is very much part of the plan that has been put forth in secret places. So now we're going to head to the scriptures revealed to Joseph Smith in the Book of Mormon and the Book of Moses, and see what the scriptures have to say about secret societies or secret combinations of old, how they got started. Here we have a photograph of the Skull and Bones Society, a modern-day secret society. You'll see the logo up close on GW's ring in a moment. Skull and Bones, the 322, probably stands for the equinox, where human sacrifice is known to occur. And we've got 3 generations of the Bushes: Prescott Bush, George Herbert Walker Bush, and George W. Bush. All are bonesmen. The Skull and Bones Society is located, or it finds its home at Yale University. It's set up by the Russell Trust. The Russell family is one of those families that are considered by those who study these things one of the Illuminati bloodlines. They have had great influence on society. And Charles Taze Russell, who set up the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, also known as the Jehovah's Witnesses, is a member of that family as well. They seem to be big in multiple areas. What a surprise. Charles Taze Russell was a high-ranking Freemason, at least the 32nd degree, probably 33rd. He was an occultist. He set up the J-Dubs. Just like Ellen Gould White, who was head of the Seventh-day Adventists, was deeply into the occult, into Theosophy, which was founded by Madame Blavatsky and head of the Lucifer Trust. The Lucifer Trust was renamed the Lucist Trust, a little more palatable for society to accept, where it has its own special room there at the United Nations building, headquarters there in New York, which land, of course, was donated by the Rockefeller family, very deeply into the occult. David Rockefeller was head of the Council on Foreign Relations, and I believe he actually founded the Trilateral Commission, probably the Organization of American States, and many other things. He was in the Committee of 300, heavy-duty occultist and architect of the New World Order. Now, I realize at this point I may have people, all sorts of viewers at this point, people that are completely unaware of this, or thought this was just, some wacky theories or something, that are beginning to notice some things that we're going to be factually showing, just like we showed the very beginnings of the portion that's about corporate governance and so forth. Concrete things using the comprehensive annual financial reports of these privately held corporations that we thought were publicly owned governments. Or you may be someone who has studied global governance through various networks, even if you just know about NGOs, all kinds of NGOs, whether you're talking about those that are well known to be pushing for and have published goals for creating a world government and basically submersing the United States, along with other countries, into such a government, which is essentially treasonous if you're operating within the United States, such as the Council on Foreign Relations. You can go to CFR.org and look at membership lists. You can see corporate sponsors and people who conduct workshops in there, like Rex Tillerson, who as a high-ranking corporate member in the oil industry was put on a big seminar for a lot of CEOs at CFR a few years back. There's a lot that can be documented, so we're not talking about some kind of theory. What's used on the news is basically to keep people from looking. And when you find the facts, you find out, well, there's a lot to this. And so, I don't usually use Christian sources for a lot of things because they seem, they're actually better than we think they are as Mormons. A lot of the time, we figure they're just nuts because they're almost like Islamic fundamentalists, about their zeal for their beliefs in their God and that everyone should worship their way. But some of their people have kept track of a few things and helped out quite a bit in tracking organizations and legal aspects, documenting things. And so I want to take a look at some aspects of this global governance goal as far as what they call a new world order. Really, new order of the ages is what's on the back of the dollar bill. And, we'll hear George Bush talking about that soon, both Georges. And if we look at the need to merge religion, we'll see the role of the National Council of Churches. When I say national, I mean there are many branches because there are many nations, and there's the World Council of Churches, and they actually have written goals. And so I'm just going to take a peek at that because those who were aware of this sort of thing in the LDS Church were, very pleased that the LDS Church, of course, was God's one true church and not involved in these kind of things. However, that changed in 2013. So let's take a look at that and see who these people fund, as well as those of you who are aware of the role of the United Nations in this and who funds them. And, we know that governments, take the money from the people now, but who set that up and so forth, and the ultimate goals there. And terrorist armies, basically, that have been funded through it, and the horrors that have taken place, especially in areas of Africa, where United Nations forces have been involved, and the horrendous things that are done. And then we see the LDS Church funding the UN, funding, getting involved with UNICEF and that sort of thing. Actually, I can't document that. I'll just maybe strike that from the record, or I'm not going to document it. You can probably find that on your own. We will see the LDS Church involved with the World Council of Churches, as we will also see probably most other churches. A lot of what I'm really trying to do is draw some connections here for people. I'm not trying to give a primer course in the establishment of the new order of the ages, but I am trying to show some connections here, how Illuminism is within the church and how corporate governance supersedes and just completely bypasses what we believe is a constitutional form of government. So and what we do see as a connective network, everywhere we see Freemasonry. We see Freemasonry everywhere we see this conspiracy, everywhere we see mind control and abuse in churches, everywhere we see leadership in government, politics, banking, world policy, NGOs. Freemasons are the leaders, almost always. If not, they're linked through some other similar, some other organization that interfaces often through Freemasonry as a conduit. Whether they're a Knight of Malta, or with the Golden Dawn, or a Rosicrucian, or, whatever it is, Skull and Bones, they're linked. This is documenting some things relative to the World and National Councils of Churches, which are integral to the globalist movement. So let's see what they've got to say. Entitled, The World Council of Churches in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. The World Council of Churches was formally constituted at Amsterdam in 1948. It's made up of various branch organizations controlled by it. The goal of the council is to unite all religions of the world into one ecumenical package, or a one-world church. But in order to unite all the world's religions together, the different doctrines held dear by these religious groups must be waived, and a focusing on those beliefs held in common must be central. One of the main branch organizations of the council is the National Council of Churches. Also included in the organizational structure of the World Council of Churches are many lesser branches, such as ministerial associations and the various public communities. See Collectivism in the Churches by Edgar C. Bundy. National Council of Churches is an organization formerly known as the Federal Council of Churches, which was organized in December of 1908 and then changed its name to National Council of Churches in 1950. The NCC is made up of various churches within the United States of America who have agreed to become members and to further the goals of the National and World Councils of Churches. The goal of the NCC is the same as the goal of the WCC, since it was the leadership of the Federal National Council of Churches which formed the WCC in 1948. See World Council of Churches, Religion or Revolution by Hugh Morton and some other guy, Hutchins, etc. Their goal goes beyond just uniting all churches into one and includes the same goals of Catholicism, the New Age, Freemasonry, the Illuminati, the United Nations, and other satanic organizations, or the goal of the New World Order with Lucifer as God and leader. To some, this may be hard to believe, but the NCC itself states this in their recommendation of points to be followed in order to bring about world peace. Okay, so this is an NGO that is involved in political reorganization of the world. Sounds like a world government strong. These are quotes from the written goals of the council. Here we go. A world government, strong, immediate limitation on national sovereignty. Did you get that? Strong, immediate limitation on national sovereignty. In other words, that's treason. International control of all armies and navies. A universal system of money. Worldwide freedom of immigration. Progressive elimination of all tariff and quota restrictions on world trade. So everything we've got going on in the national government, everything from NAFTA with trade to establishing a world currency is involved here. And these are churches with this goal. And control of armies and navies under, obviously, the United Nations. A universal system of money, worldwide freedom of immigration, etc. Democratically controlled international bank. A new order of economic life. A new order. Where have I heard that? Is both imminent and imperative through voluntary cooperation within the framework of democracy. Anytime anybody who uses the word democracy who's not completely ignorant generally is a globalist. America is supposed to be a republic, but you hear people who are pushing for globalism calling it a democracy. As we know, the founders of the United States were completely against democracy. People like, Monroe, Adams, and Adams, probably both of them. Probably Jefferson. Okay, cooperation within the framework of democracy or through explosive political revolution. Did we hear him endorsing political revolution? Well, they did send in the missionaries to Hawaii before the United States annexed it after suddenly they got a revolution going. The WCC and its branch organizations are indeed involved in bringing about this explosive political revolution in countries which are not following their plan for a one-world church and a world order, a new world order. The following are just a few examples of this. The WCC gave $85 grand. This was published in 1996, so
maybe you can double or triple it. Anyway, we know that the money would be higher in today's dollars. The WCC gave $85,000 to an African nationalist terrorist group, Patriotic Front, who were waging guerrilla warfare in Rhodesia and Zimbabwe in 1978. See the Seattle Times, August 25th, 1981 for reference on that. These terrorists killed over 1,900 people. So terrorists being funded by the World Council of Churches. So is your church giving to that? These terrorists killed over 1,900 people, including the 8 British missionaries and their 4 children in Rhodesia that year. See Reader's Digest article in August of 82. 1974, WCC gave £6,000 to members of terrorist organization ZANU in Africa, which are responsible for killing 87 Rhodesian civilians. Nice. Okay, I got some other reference for that. Also in 1974, WCC gave £50,000 to another Marxist guerrilla force, Frelimo, see, same as the last one, which was WCC Religion or Revolution. Okay, great. This is a book. After the Rhodesian government fell to these terrorist groups, so they were successful in their funding, I guess, this statement was then given by their representatives at the WCC conference in Melbourne, Australia, May of 1980. They said, "Our hard-won victory did not come only through our own determination. We were sustained and reinforced by the support, material, moral, and spiritual, accorded to us by the World Council of Churches." Wow. And its member churches. American Opinion. Sounds like American Opinion magazine, probably. 1982, January of 82. The World Council of Churches also gave funds to the communist North Vietnamese government. See WCC Religion or Revolution, page 16, the PLO, Cuba, etc. What is that? Palestinian Liberation Organization, and other pro-Soviet totalitarian movements. See Reader's Digest, January 1983, page 120. They also gave $823,000 to the communist-backed organization, acronym SWAPO, in Nambia. See same Religion or Revolution, page 28. 1982, January. It comes from you. The funding comes from you. They say it comes from you if you put money on the collection plate of a church that is part of a denomination which belongs to the National Council of Churches, or the World Council of Churches, I imagine. The money goes from your church to your denomination, to the National Councils of Churches, to the World Council. So they've followed the money trail, which is a lot of what's going to be done in the video here regarding corporate governance and these churches participating in activities that promote the agenda that all these corporations seem to be block voting for, and gaining the boards of directors, gaining control of the board of directors, and block voting so that we see policy in political venues with businesses. All right. Innocent people being murdered by your tithing dollars, people. So, if you are a member of the SDA, or the Watchtower, or the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or hundreds of others, yeah, you may be funding something that you really hadn't wanted to. Little headline here. Mormons join National Council of Churches. I think this is in Samoa or something. This is in April of 2013. The Mormon Church has become the latest member of the National Council of Churches. With those involved indicating the matter to be a sensitive one. Officially called the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, its acceptance as the NCC's 11th member occurred last Friday. Obviously, it's not the United States. There's a lot more than 11 churches in the National Council in the U.S. I do not want to make any comment regarding the LDS membership until the Council meets on Friday, said Secretary Reverend whatever Moto. Mormon headquarters at Pesega refused to comment for the same reason. Blah, blah, blah. Basically, They tried to keep it to mainstream Christians, but maybe they were opening up the gates to others like Mormons and SDA and the J-Dubs. As of 2001 census percentage of the population which belonged to each, blah, 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 34% Catholic, 19% Methodist. This isn't Samoa, there'd be more Mormons. Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, 12.7%, Assembly of God, 6%, SDA, 3.5%. Okay, well, not sure which country that was, but apparently it's happened in America and the World Council of Churches, because I found it on a couple other lists, so they're in the yearbook.
There's just so many rabbit holes to go down on this because everything is linked together in this network of secret societies, of families in certain bloodlines especially, that seem to be in power throughout the ages in the occult traditions.
Continuing on the occult and religion common ground here, we can mention, well, the gal who started Christian Science. I don't know much about her, but her husband was a Freemason. L. Ron Hubbard, well, he was a Freemason. He was a disciple of Aleister Crowley, known as the most wicked man on earth, who was, of course, a Freemason. And he was head of the LA area Order Templo Orientis, very satanic group. Benjamin Franklin was a head of a chapter of that, or a lodge, I suppose, in France, I believe. And, Crowley was a horrendous Satanist. We're not going to talk about the things he did, but he seemed to have these disciples that, so L. Ron Hubbard founded Scientology. And so he was deeply into the occult. He even said for his revelation things, he was using automatic writing and, various other occult methods. LA is a hotbed for Satanism, San Bernardino as well. Recall meeting a young couple that was joining the church, converts. She had been a witch and had participated in rituals and horrendous things in the Temple of Satan there in Santa Monica. They had a lot of babies about 9 months after they had some things going on in their temples, and the babies proved to be used for human sacrifice in their temples, as she said she witnessed and was horrified and quit. At any rate, that was involved with, I'm sure, LaVeyan Satanism. Anton LaVey was also a disciple of Aleister Crowley. And Jimmy Page got Crowley's castle, thinking that he and his partners with Led Zeppelin would gain from the strength of the black magic he thought he'd learn more of in the castle. This is just a sample of what we see with occult leaders also at the top in religion, in Hollywood, in the music industry, in politics, banking, etc. They seem to be almost all high-degree Freemasons. Freemasonry seems to be a breeding ground for the occult at the top levels. As a matter of fact, it would seem that the top levels are the occult, or it is an occult religion. Who knows what degree you're going to say that they realize that, but that's what the top guys say. That's what Albert Pike had to say.
Surprisingly, we find skull and bonesmen in very pivotal places in society as power brokers. Senator Kerry, who is now, of course, the Secretary of State, also was running for president against George Bush, so we had bonesmen against bonesmen. I guess that meant we were going to have someone from the Skull and Bones Society in the presidency pretty much no matter what that year. And that's just the way they like to dominate things. They are a big part of this network of secret societies that really run the show from behind the scenes. They are deeply occult, and if you read about them, I recommend you not reading it out loud to your children, because their practices, their initiation rituals, are pretty evil.
So I'm just going to roll through a few pictures here to establish something. All right, so this is Anton LaVey, head of the Church of Satan. Well, in the middle you see Obama. Anyway, just want to take a look at some of these world leaders here. There's Hillary Clinton. If not, we've got him later. Pat Robertson, Indiana Governor Dan, what's his name? Here's LaVey again. You see what these folks are doing? They're not all giving a sign to deaf people. And they're not all Texas Longhorn fans. See Michelle there? Let's see. They know what they're doing. There. Let's just flip this for something a little faster. Who's that? Oh, that's their governor, and there's... You recognize these faces. Political leaders, people in Hollywood, and very many of them you're going to be seen using the goat's head. There's Mrs. Bush. She's not at a Longhorns game. So, why is this? Why are these people all using these symbols that are related to Satanism and secret societies? We find people, the leaders, there's Dick Cheney, political leaders, banking leaders, religious leaders, business leaders, movie stars, and the music industry. Why? There comes a point, there's Aleister Crowley on the left. Then we got the triangle going on. And then we got... Anyway, I'm not going to give a whole seminar in secret society symbols and so forth, Satanism, but I'm pretty sure that we're not all talking to deaf people, and we're not all at Longhorns games. We're not all at a heavy metal concert. Of course, they know it's about Satanism. So, the Shakabra, I don't know if it means anything evil. Never heard of it. But we know what the horns are, and we know what the victory or peace sign is. The goat's head. Well, people that know anything about Satanism do. So, just wanted to roll through a few of those. And the work of destruction come upon you, even the work of sort of the eternal God. Earlier it said there, for power gain, glory, all those kind of things, that people could get whatever they wanted and, have power and get away with all kinds of wickedness and murder and whoredom. So, the warning unto the Gentiles here from the Lord. Wherefore the Lord commandeth you, when you shall see these things come among you, that you shall awake to the sense of your awful situation, because of the secret combination which shall be among you. So to the Gentiles here. And we're talking, seems to be directed to the people of the United States, particularly, which shall be among you, or will be unholy because of the blood of the innocent people it kills. Okay. For it comes to pass that whoso buildeth it up, seeketh to overthrow the freedom of all lands, nations and countries, and it bringeth to pass the destruction of all people, for it is built up by the devil. Okay, so that's our that's kind of the basis there, the beginnings of it. Now, the daughter of Jared, this is the bad Jared, not the good Jared, this is a little later on, said that, hey, Dad, didn't they have writings, the things we brought with us across the deep about these secret combinations? I always thought, why would, these people that are righteous, these prophets, be bringing the oaths of satanic secret societies across the deep? But anyway, that's what the reference is there a little earlier. It's all either chapter 8 there. Then, of course, later we have some references to their people being destroyed and the government being destroyed and so forth. It says, therefore they did combine against the people of the Lord and enter into a covenant to destroy them and to deliver those who were guilty of murder from the grasp of justice, which was about to be administered according to the law. And they did set at defiance the law and the rights of their country, and they did covenant with one with another to destroy the governor and to establish a king over the land, that the land should nowhere be at liberty, but should be subject unto kings. How about that? So the secret combination just decided to destroy. This was the paid people who went to Jacob Bugath, I think. So they wanted to destroy the representative government the Nephites had, where they voted in their chief judges and established kings. Oddly, in 1776, May 1st, on Beltane, a satanic holiday, Adam Weishaupt officially inaugurated the Illuminati, and they wanted to do the opposite. They wanted to destroy the monarchies, and establish a different form of government, probably representative government that they can more easily control. How about that? Kind of weird, huh? So with all that warning in the Book of Moses and the Book of Mormon, in particular, to secret societies that sound so reminiscent of illuminated Freemasonry, Rosicrucianism, etc., that the Danites and the Council of 50 get set up in the church. Pretty weird, huh? Oath-bound secret societies, which it says the Lord worketh not in secret societies or secret combinations. So those are some pretty puzzling things. And then when we see the activities of the brethren and the handshakes they give to the president and vice president and some of the other folks in religion and politics doing the same thing, it kind of tells us something, doesn't it? So we return to my story of discovery here.
And there's a lot of specific prophecy from mostly Joseph Smith, and it's not necessarily canonized. So I read a whole lot of books. And the more I studied, I started waking up to see that not everything's really a manifest destiny story that we get, like in First Nephi and so forth. God protected the colonists and made them win the war against the British, so that this could be the bastion of freedom and the gospel restored, that kind of a thing. Started seeing some inconsistencies in the story with America's foundation. At first, you just look at how things are just getting corrupted in the early 20th century by these international bankers, but actually, as you deconstruct, you notice that there are things that are out of place and not right. Well, wait a minute, that war was engineered. No, wait a minute, that one was engineered. Hey, wait a minute, the Revolutionary War doesn't look right. Read the Treaty of Versailles, and you notice it doesn't look like the colonists really won. Not with the terms they agreed to, financial, extreme burdens this country got into. Anyway, we're going to look at a presentation that is completely almost independent of anything that I ever read about, heard about, with regards to how things are done, how these secretive and secret societies within secretive societies operate and make things actually work here and have governance. Going to find out that what we thought was our constitutional republic is basically an illusion. A lot of things that we've been told are just simply not the case. We live in an illusion. So pretty much with that, I'm going to start to open up the floodgates of information here on how things are actually financially controlled in the physical, legal, financial world here in the United States in particular, and how things are done through financial legal vehicles such as corporations. Everything is a corporation and everything is commerce, and nothing is what we think it is. So with that, I'm going to start utilizing highlights from a presentation that gets really involved with that aspect. In the meantime, also going to mix in evidence of state alliances in high places with people in power in various areas of society, whether it's Hollywood, the media, politics, finance, banking, and, very important, religion. Because when the powers that be want to go to war, the Amalekites on the towers are the preachers. They are the religious leaders. And we'll see that their
role is critical in directing public opinion, especially when it comes to patriotism and getting people to want to serve, as it is called, in the military operations, which happen to be worldwide for the United States. So, when I was a young person, a teenager, I began studying these things, and I noticed that certain secret societies seemed to be highly influential in guiding other organizations, NGOs, non-government organizations, NGOs like the CFR, into determining foreign policy and causing these things to happen, causing these wars to happen, and they seem to have a great effect on what was done in government, whether it be in the Democrat or the Republican Party. And so we're continuing to study what was going on with the government of the United States. And so we're involved with people who were in the church and people who were in other Christian faiths, and maybe some atheists, but I'm not sure if there were many of those, in this effort of education and trying to stem the tide of the destruction of the Bill of Rights and Constitution. And we studied, after our family, when I read the Book of Mormon. And of course, we know in the Book of Mormon, there's a lot of talk about secret combinations. And of course, in the Book of Ether, chapter 8, we read about a certain secret combination, or in other words, secret society, oath-bound secret society, that would be seeking to destroy the freedom of the Gentiles here in the United States, basically, and the rest of the world progressively there.
would be what would appear to say, working in covert fashion to destroy the freedom that the Book of Mormon also seemed to be advocating, that was set up by God. As we read early in the Book of Mormon, in First Nephi, the suggestion that the Spirit of God or the Holy Ghost overshadowed Columbus to come discover the Americas and to bring the people of Europe here to set up a nation that would have freedom of religion and, in general, a lot more freedom than would have been had under the European monarchies and the feudalistic type of system that they tended to have there as well with regards to property rights and so forth. We all know the story, or many of us do. So the idea was that God set up a nation where religious freedom would be able to cultivate an environment where the gospel could be restored for the last times, the dispensation of the fullness of times. And of course, as the story goes, shortly after the nation was established with its constitutional government, Joseph Smith was born and had heavenly messengers, including God the Father and Jesus Christ, as the story went, come to see him and begin to usher in the dispensation of the fullness of times, in which the priesthood authority would be restored, revelation would know all the things that we needed to know, and so forth. And as we studied these things,